And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you for showing up. Anyone here for the first time? What brings you here? Probably that guy.
Yeah.
Should I throw you out now or let you stay? What did this fine young gentleman say to get you here? He promised you pizza and beer?
No, he just asked us if we wanted to meditate.
Nice. Right on.
Sure.
You second that?
Yeah.
Yes. I've known this one a long time. We wouldn't be here without you. You know that?
I think you would have found a way, but...
We might have found a way, but it would have taken longer.
Yeah.
You know? So we can all thank Pierre. On the count of three, everybody say thank you, Pierre. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Pierre.
Yeah. Thanks, dude. And now you have 2 Zen masters.
Yeah.
How old are they?
3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
Exactly the same age.
That's correct.
Like an hour. Like how far?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Yeah. It doesn't take an hour, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Are they fighting for who's older already?
No.
Not yet.
We know who it is.
You know who it is.
Oh, yeah.
No, I know you know who it is, but
They don't interact with each other
they're
yet.
not on speaking terms yet.
No, they don't. I don't think they're even really aware of each other yet.
Yeah, that's great. And everybody's doing well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good. Anyone else here for the first time that can top that? No? Anyone else here for the first time, period? You're all good? Yeah? All right. So we're going to start with a meditation practice. For those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. Right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. Meaning, don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps. Slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, also just trying to sit up straight, relaxing shoulders, hands are on the knees or lap, whatever's comfortable. If you're brand new to meditation, it's important to understand you're not going to think nothing, you're not going to shut your mind off, you're not going to go blank. You'll continue to have a racing mind. I will say things periodically to either wake you up because you've fallen asleep or simply remind you to come back to present moment using sensation of breath. Most important, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with your eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention and focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, and focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment and learning to be with life as it arises, which is often very difficult. The present moment is filled with conflict, chaos, difficulties, challenges. And many of us have created habits our entire lives of running away from the conflict and chaos and difficulties and challenges. Yet you keep running, and there's more conflict and chaos and difficulties and challenges. So this practice is learning to sit with it and be with life as it arises. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. All we're working on is trying to feel this way more often. A little calmer, a little quieter, a little more settled. Unless you feel like an absolute mess right now, then you don't want that too much. And that's possible. And very probable. I'll never forget years ago somebody shared after meditation, she raised her hand and said, does anybody else feel like there's a million little people in their head with knives chopping everything up? Never forget that. And it was such an important, I think, example for all of us to remember that just because you sit and do meditation and you get quiet and do nothing for 3 minutes or 20 minutes doesn't mean all of a sudden everything is perfect in your head. And especially for those who might be new to this practice, very often when you sit still and do nothing, what are you left with? Yourself. What are you often trying to run away from? Yourself. So sitting still and being quiet is very painful for a lot of people. And that's why we practice it. When I talk about it not being fun and not being an escape, most of us have enough things we've used to escape to our whole lives, regardless of, what those escapes are. We'd spend all night if I had everybody list all their escapes. Be more fun probably, but still. So we have a lot of escapes. And this is the opposite of that. This is ultimately beginning to realize that this practice is not about escaping. As I alluded to earlier, most of us have done that already. And yet we still ended up here. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, which is where we spend so much of our time, hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they do this, wishing they do that. So much time trying to fix, change, and control, manipulate others. We can't even control what we do half the time. If for some reason we think we're going to be able to control everybody else. So when we set all that down and we learn to be with life as it arises, things get a little simpler for a little bit. But it requires you to surrender the one thing that you hold on to so dearly, which is the illusion of what? Control. Now, I'm sure nobody in this room likes to try to control anything or anyone. But in case you're the one or two people in here that does, this practice is good for you. So with that, I'll pause. For me, always just really prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. We'll use the rest of our brief time this evening for questions. And to those joining virtually, again, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. If you have any questions, feel free to put them on the chat box, and I'll do my best to respond as well. So, yeah, yeah.
What's the Buddha behind you, the black one?
Which one?
The one right behind you, on black. How come it looks very different than the rest of them?
The skinny one?
Yeah.
Yes, my favorite story. You never seen that before, huh?
I know.
Actually, I lied. Lots of my stories are my favorite story. In case there's a follow-up question and I have to say that's my favorite story. That is what's called the emaciated Buddha. And I'll kind of sum up the story for you, right? You're brand new to this practice, huh?
Yeah, it's my third time here.
Third time. So you should have shit figured out by now. Very often people think that the guy with the big belly you probably thought that was the Buddha, huh?
Yeah.
It's not. It's kind of like finding out, I'll get to that, hang on. It's kind of like finding out that, you know Santa Claus isn't real, right? Sorry if I shattered that for you. Easter Bunny, all those things. So the guy with the big belly, I'll start that. His name was Hotai. He was a monk in China about 1,000 years ago. Hotai means bag carrier. He was very happy, very jolly, very prosperous, carried a big bag with lots of gifts for people. Sound familiar? Man, and we think we invented everything here, So this is a monk in China 1,000 years ago, Hotai. When Buddhism came west, images of him started to come over first. And so he became known as the happy Buddha, the good luck Buddha. Our culture, for some reason, decided that if you start rubbing your belly, rubbing the big belly, that'll bring you good luck. So they put them all over casinos, and now everybody throws money at them at the casinos. Who's winning there, right? So that's not the Buddha. He was a monk in China 1,000 years ago. But Western culture, that's very often the first image people see. And ultimately, the reality is, my 80-year-old Jewish mother, when she looks at that guy, it makes her smile. So that's all that really matters. Whether it was the Buddha or, Donald Duck, who cares? If it makes you happy and smile, that's great. But coming back to this guy, this is Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha. This is him, and I'll kind of give a brief story, because I think, he was a prince, 29 years, raised in a palace, always sheltered. They predicted when he was born that he would either be a great king or a kind of like a wise sage. So 29 years old, he sneaks out in the middle of the night and he sees old age, sickness, and death and an ascetic, a very simple nun or monk. And he says to his buddy Chan, he says, "What's this old age, sickness, and death stuff? I've never seen that." Because they've moved it out of the palace. They knew that if he saw suffering, he would never want to be a king and kill and harm. That he would want to become, a great wise teacher. So he goes into the town, he sees old age, sickness, and death, and an ascetic, and he says to his buddy Chana, "What is all this? Does this happen to all of us?" And Chana says, "Yes, my lord, it happens to all of us." He was a prince, he addressed him as my lord. And so he said, "Well, I can't live a life of wealth and riches when there's a world out there that's suffering." So at 29 years old, he sneaks out in the middle of the night, spends the next 6 years roaming the base of the Himalayan mountains, And during that time, they practiced many things, but one of them was this, as a yogi, Hindu practice, Vedic practices, as a yogi, they thought that if they starved themselves and began to overcome the attachment to the physical body, that would be the way to awakening. That would be the way to end suffering. So it's said that they ate 1 grain of rice a day. And you could literally take your fingers front to back and they would touch. So this statue is called the emaciated Buddha. They come to a riverbed and someone offered them food. And all his buddies were like, no, we don't eat. And Siddhartha was like, something to the effect of, well, I'm hungry, So he took the bowl, he said, I'm going to put the bowl in the stream, and if it goes against the stream, I'm going to eat. If the bowl goes against the stream, he starts to eat. This introduces in Buddhism what we call the middle path, balance in our lives. I'll come back to that at some point. So he continues on his way, he begins to eat, regains his physical strength, and then at 35, he sat down under the Bodhi tree, and he said, I'm not moving until I figure out why we suffer. So he sat for 21 days, began to understand the nature of all suffering comes from one place and one place only, and that's where? What's your name?
Miguel.
Miguel, where does all the suffering in the world come from?
From people.
No! We could go on tour together. That's a good answer, but it's absolutely wrong. Let's try this again. Where does all suffering come from? If it's not people, who else could it be? Don't look at your buddy next to you. It's not your buddy's fault. Huh? Ourselves! You say that surprisingly. Yes, all suffering taught by the Buddha comes from the nature of our own mind. We might be triggered, impacted by people and places and things, right? But in order for us to suffer, nobody else gives us suffering. We're really good at giving that to ourselves. So that tapestry above the exit sign up there, those 5 guys who left him, they came back and they said, there's Siddhartha, looks like he's figured something out. We'll sit with him. He sat down, he taught the Four Noble Truths, which is the first teaching of the Buddha, and they said, you have awakened, we will call you the Buddha. And that just means the awakened one. So he then taught for 45 years, and then he died at 80. So this statue, the emaciated Buddha, when we first opened up the temple 18 years ago, we picked that from Buddha for you at the time because it represented us. At this point in his life, he was physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually near death. Hang on, I know you got more questions. I'll get there. And what we wanted to represent was not this awakened Buddha that we were trying to be, but like we had to really wake up to the fact that we were this guy. We were physically, mentally, emotionally near death, and we needed to get out of our own way and stop being greedy, angry, and selfish, and start being nice. So that's been our main Buddha for 18 years, the emaciated Buddha. Does that help?
Yeah.
One more question, go ahead.
Yeah. So who's the one behind him?
We could do this all night, That is Kuan Yin. The large one in the middle? Yeah, so her name means hearer of the world's cries. Right? She hears all the suffering in the world and pours out compassion to heal. So when we suffer, you know what we need? Not more hatred and anger and ignorance, not more pain, not more misery. We need compassion. So she hears all the suffering and then holds or pours out the vase of compassion. Kuan Yin, hear the world's cries. Which is a beautiful teaching and practice because when there is suffering in the world, which there always has been, and there always will be, it's important to listen to it. To not avoid it, not ignore it, not run from it, but listen to it. Listen to the pain and suffering that exists in the world. Listen to the pain and suffering that exists in your family and your friends, your communities, your strangers, everywhere. There's so much pain and suffering in the world, and there always has been. And so this practice requires us to sit down and get quiet to be able to listen to it. And that includes listening to the suffering within ourselves. Right? We can't avoid it. Well, you can do anything you want, but the practice is not to avoid any of that. To be very well aware of my own suffering and the suffering of others. And the practice is to find a balance in how do I make sure I suffer less so I can then share kindness and compassion with others. Miguel, you ever been really angry and pissed off? Mm-hmm. And when you are, how do you treat people?
Very poorly.
Very poorly. You ever been happy?
Yeah.
And when you are, how do you treat people?
Really good.
Really good? Wow, you're learning fast. So be happy. Don't worry. Should make a song about that. Other questions?
I just want to comment, just being a father, I mean, the hardest thing is hearing the crying. So you brought up poignant again, meaning the name. I don't know, it just resonated with me because hearing the two babies crying.
Yeah.
And it's just a small piece of what everyone's going through.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. And the thing is, the beauty of hearing 2-3-month-olds crying is that, you know, they're very, most likely, when they're crying, it's probably pretty easy to figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
A couple things.
Yeah.
They're either what?
Hungry.
What else? Gassy. Like I said, probably 3 things. You know, I mean, I'm no mind reader or genius of 3-year-olds, but it's not that difficult to figure out what's going on with, you know, the babies.
Right.
The challenge is when they're no longer 3 months old and they're 13 and they're 19 and they're 80, you know, there's a lot more to figure out. So far you're doing great. 3 months in, you are nailing it. What else? Thoughts, questions?
What does the Buddha say about lack of sleep?
What does the Buddha say about lack of sleep?
What would your advice be for someone who
and what would be your reason for having lack of sleep? Let's just play this out loud so everybody's on the same page. The babies. How old are these babies? The 3-month-old babies, yeah. My guess is, I don't know what the Buddha would say about anything. He died a long time ago, but my guess is he would say if you had twin 3-month-old babies, lack of sleep is the reality of what you're going to have.
Yeah.
The Buddha was brilliant at teaching us about reality. You know? He was a pretty smart dude, but I don't think there would have been any other answers too much other than
to just sit with it?
Just be with the lack of sleep. But look at you smiling, laughing, you know, you're doing great. You know, you haven't killed this one yet, you're doing great. So, you know, the one of my favorite Zen expressions is when hungry, eat, when tired, sleep. But that doesn't always work. You know, if you can eat, if you can sleep, great. But sometimes, you know, when you're tired, be tired. Just embrace being tired. You know, my only, I guess, suggestion would be, not that I need to tell, you know, a mom or dad this, but try to find as much gratitude in the world as you can, as I know you do. In the fact that you're not sleeping because you have 2 precious humans who need you. Like, how beautiful is that? You know? And you got the rest of your life to sleep. You'll be all right. Says a guy who's never had children. Other questions?
Does Buddhism ever get weaponized? Like the way I feel like politically there's so much divisiveness in terms of using God for like one side or the other. In history, like has Buddhism ever been like put into a box to like separate sides?
Put into a box to separate sides, meaning like expand on that a little bit more, like what you're getting at, just with the Buddhist part.
Like, has it ever been used for like political gain of like power based on like right and wrong or good and bad or you know, like I feel like
are there wars over Buddhism? Like my Buddhism is better than your Buddhism kind of thing?
Or just, you know, for
Like the Crusades of Christianity?
yeah. You know?
Yeah. I mean, so I'll say this first and foremost, and I'm sure you've heard me say this. I'm not a historian. I'm not a scholar. And so my study and knowledge of Buddhism is super practice-based. But my limited knowledge is not really, not Buddhism against Buddhism, right? There's not like, I mean, the thing I always say is like Buddhists aren't standing out on a street corner being like, yo, come join us. Like they're not trying to recruit you. They're not trying to change you. Even you going back to the original, one of the 14 questions that the Buddha was asked, you know, being raised in a Vedic tradition as a Hindu, for the most part, the disciples would ask him, should we believe in gods and goddesses? And this isn't direct to your question, but I want to start here. And what he said was, I'm not going to answer that for you. He said, look, I'm just a human. If you have beliefs in gods and goddesses, referring to Hindu gods and goddesses, right? Lakshmi, Saraswati, Parvati, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma. You have all these Hindu gods and goddesses, endless. And he's like, look, if that's your belief, that's your belief. If you have that, great. If you don't, that's okay too. I'm not here to tell you what to believe in. I'm here to teach you a way to be simple, to live a simple, peaceful, kind life. And if whatever your religious beliefs are or are not, that's up to you. So fast forward to today, I think that's a beautiful teaching, and I'll come back in a second. That's why, 99.9% of the people here, no one here is Buddhist. They're Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, pagan, Mormon, or lack thereof, or whatever. So Buddhism is not trying to make anybody Buddhist. Someone asked the Dalai Lama years ago, does this country, talking about the United States, need more Buddhists? And he's like, the world has enough. We're good on Buddhists. We don't need more. This country needs more people who are peaceful, happy, and kind. So based on those teachings and even modern translations from like Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh, my guess would be, I'd venture to say that there weren't Buddhists out there trying to like convert you or kill you or, change your religious views. Now there are debates within Buddhism, schools of Buddhism, traditions of Buddhism, but even there, they're more like debates. Like Tibetan Buddhism is very much like, let's debate these teachings. Let's argue these teachings, but not in like a warlike manner. More in like a friendly, like, I'm going to challenge you. You're going to, like in a philosophical debate, truly. Tibetan Buddhism is big on like, you can probably pull up YouTube, like Tibetan Buddhist debates, and they're like, yelling one teaching, and then the other one yells back another teaching. And so they're kind of like bantering back and forth, but they're like monastic monks and nuns and brothers and sisters living together. So it's, my guess is no, but also keep in mind that Buddhists are just human. They're just human, just like the Buddha was. So I used to give this example a lot early on here, but, going back, say, 20 years, if you got into a taxi cab here in the United States before, you had Ubers and Lyfts and all that kind of stuff, you got into a taxi, and what would you typically see hanging in the taxi? A cross, or Jesus, right? Does that mean the taxi driver does everything that Jesus said? No. You go to an Asian culture at that time or even today, what's hanging in their dashboard? A Buddha. Does that mean that driver is doing everything the Buddha taught? No. So that's where I'm not saying that Buddhist countries or Buddhist people have never been at war about things. I'm sure, of course. But they're just human. But it's not specific into the teachings, nor are people trying to like convert you or get you or sign you up or strip you.
Shouldn't that be the basis of all religions?
Well, I'm not a comparative religious guy, and I'm not here to talk about the basis of all religions.
I know, that just feels so maddening to come here and feel like that is, to me, like pure love. Is and that seems to be what religious points are trying to make. So then I like get in my head, okay, well then how do we make all these other religions Buddhist?
You don't. You can't. You have to surrender your control to try to make people anything. That's your problem. You're trying to make people believe what you want them to believe.
Yeah.
That's where you have to surrender. People are going to believe what they're going to... The Buddha himself said, I'm not here. He said, do not believe me because I'm saying this. Yet what you just said is you want people to believe it because you have said it. That's very arrogant. Mm-hmm. You've been here long enough where I can call you on your shit. Yes.
Yeah, totally. No,
that's why you're here in the front row. I get it.
Yeah,
but it's very arrogant for us to say like, and I call this Buddhist arrogance, and I talk about this a lot and I have for years. It's very arrogant to say, well, like, Buddhism is the way. You should all join us. Like, that's the most non-Buddhist thing anybody can do.
It just seems so contradictory.
I understand. But the Buddha himself, who I think was a really wise individual, said, don't believe this because I'm saying it. He said, try it. Put it into your life. If it makes sense and makes you kinder and gentler and happier, then use it. If it doesn't, abandon it. But you can't convince people of everything. But I also talked on Saturday about, the Buddha, or maybe 2 weeks ago, I was kind of joking, but seriously using the term influencer, right? In our modern day, we have someone who's an influencer. The Buddha was definitely trying to influence people's views. I mean, he didn't roam around for 45 years teaching kindness just out of boredom. He really wanted people to grasp this understanding that we cause our own suffering and we can be happy. But as long as we're trying to control and convince others of anything, you're never going to be happy because you're stuck on what other people are thinking and saying and doing. That's what you have to stop doing. Practice loving kindness, practice compassion, believe what you believe in wholeheartedly in you, but stop trying to get people to believe it. That's where your suffering comes from. Yeah.
You had given a lecture, I think once earlier last week, in regards to someone talking about hatred in our country. You mentioned that Buddhism is loud.
That Buddhism is what?
You said Buddhism was loud.
Oh, loud, yeah.
It's engaged, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
And it just made me think about the Buddhist monk in Vietnam who had performed self-immolation.
Yes.
And then obviously the Air Force personnel earlier last year did the same thing.
Yes.
What can you tell me if you know anything about that? And
Yeah.
that's very unique.
Yeah. So there's an image of time of the Vietnam War where there was a Buddhist monk who set himself on fire. Very famous. I won't. I used to be able to say the name, but I'm not going to attempt to say it and say it incorrectly. But very famous image. And all I can say about that and that question, and it's come up a lot, and I've looked at it enough. This is my own interpretation of that. And yes, to your first comment, just for those who didn't hear it, I talked, I think, on Saturday about Thich Nhat Hanh and engaged Buddhism, being an influencer. Like, we're in society to try to create, with Buddhist practice, love and kindness and compassion and things like that. We're not just like sitting here in our own little privilege, ignoring the world. Like, we're engaging around social justice issues and trying to bring less hatred and anger into society. That's Buddhist practice. But to do that, and I'm recapping what I talked about, but to do that without having hatred and anger in your heart. Lots of people want the world to be a certain way, but you're doing it from a place of hating and anger, hatred and anger. That's what the practice is to abandon. That's not what Thich Nhat Hanh was teaching. It's not what Martin Luther King was teaching. It's not what the Buddha was teaching. They were all teaching to bring change into this world, if that's what you want to do, but from a place of love and kindness, not from a place of hatred and anger and control. Because a lot of that is about control. So to your point about, and I can just speak to, again, my very own interpretation of a monk who would, do that in protest, is that, to put it into context briefly, Buddhism at its core comes from a time and place where they all believed in rebirth. 100%. Reincarnation, continuation of consciousness, whatever you want to call it. At the time of the Buddha, that's what everybody believed, right? You walked up to somebody in the street then and said, hey, you got one life, you're going to heaven or hell. They would have thought you were crazy. You go up to people today and say, hey, you're going to be reborn. They're like, huh? Right? So we are learning Buddhism in a completely different way of time, or at a completely different time in a different way. How many of you came here tonight because you want to make sure you had a good rebirth? Nobody. You all came here because you're suffering, and you want your suffering to end. The Buddha taught that, but he wasn't teaching us how to be happy all day. That's not what he wanted, ultimately, I believe. What he wanted, and the reason he left home, was to figure out how to end suffering. Now, to most people, modern-day Buddhism is like, well, the way to end suffering is what? Happiness. No. And I'm all for you being happy. Let's all be happy. If we start being happier, we'll stop being assholes to people. So I understand that. But what the Buddha was teaching at that time was there was one way and one way only to stop suffering. And that was to stop being what? I kind of gave it away already, folks. With death, we are guaranteed what? Reincarnation, rebirth, continuation of consciousness. So he wasn't teaching just for everybody to get all their stuff happy and peaceful. He was teaching people how to free themselves from the cycle of rebirth, because once you are born, you're guaranteed to suffer. You can Google 12 links of dependent origination. And the idea was to get yourself out of samsara, out of the cycle of rebirth. That's what he was teaching. So they all understood that the consciousness would continue. Fast forward to today, and to the monk that you're referencing, right? Millions of monks and Buddhists all over the world still believe and always have in rebirth, reincarnation, continuation of consciousness. So the mind believes it's going to continue. They're beyond the physical attachment to the body, and I say this with a massive asterisk that says, do not think that, and I'm not saying this to you, this is to anybody, right? And to like the 12 people watching online. Do not think that like you can just poof, and overcome the attachment to physical form. We are stuck. So this is not a lesson that says, oh, I can just go kill myself and I'll be reborn and everything is good. No. It's where your mind is at. So you have to go back and ask that monk, where was his mind at the moment he did that? And my guess is pretty damn beautiful. So those are just my unenlightened, ignorant thoughts on that piece. You know? Yeah.
I think I intellectually understand the need to let go of the hatred and judgment of others.
Great. Next question.
How do I go from the head to the heart?
Time, practice. Time and practice. Meditation every single day. Gratitude every single day. Somebody was here Saturday just so wrapped up in all this stuff. And I was like, when was the last time you helped somebody? Oh, I can't help anybody right now. Really? Why not? Rattling on all the stuff they were angry about. Go help somebody. I can't. Go help somebody. Your question, my answer, and I very rarely give answers. I usually just try to confuse you until you get your own answers, because that's what my master always taught me. Stop looking for answers, start changing your questions. But my answer to you directly is spend every freaking day for 30 minutes, sit, breathe, and find gratitude and appreciation in your breath. And every single day spend an hour helping somebody else. Cultivate a deep sense of gratitude and compassion for everything you have. Not comparing it to other stuff that you hate and are angry about right now. But another one of my favorite expressions, Zen expressions, is to a worm in horseradish, the entire world is horseradish. If you want to spend your entire world in horseradish, go right ahead. But there are millions of people outside this door right now that you could help. But if you're all busy being pissed off and angry and hating the world, then you yourself are going to be pissed off and miserable and hating the world. When you could help somebody outside right now. Do that every single day for an hour. Meditate every single day for 30 minutes on compassion and gratitude and help everybody for an hour. Do that every single day for a year. I'm not kidding. And then come back and ask a different question. But what I see constantly, not just for the brave souls asking the questions, but from everybody here and everybody that's ever walked in these doors for 18 years, is everybody asks questions and everybody wants to be satisfied. I'm not here to satisfy you. I'm here to challenge you that says, get out of your shit and go help people. You can sit and complain and be miserable and cry and be sad and still help people. I'm not saying that the helping people replaces the misery that you may be feeling right now. I'm not ignoring it. Whatever you're feeling, own it, give it power, give it love, give it appreciation. It's there, it's real, if you have it. But that does not stop you from helping people. So if you want these things that Buddhism talks about, you can't just sit there and complain about everything all day long. Go help people. We all know, Miguel, when you help people, how do you feel? Good. Do that every single day for a year.
I have another question.
I know you do. Go ahead. And we'll close on this question.
Right now you told her to do 3 things every day for a year. But the first time I came here, you said, I remember a lot. You said breathe, smile, and be kind.
Yeah.
For 3 years.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You think I remember what I said?
My question to you right now is
Which one is it?
No. 1 year, 3 years,
Yeah.
4 years. Where did you get the time?
Just ignore everything I said. No, Miguel, I love it. You're great. I love your question. And you're being serious. I mean, I'm joking and I shouldn't be, but you're being serious. So what you're saying is, and I mean this very seriously, half the time, you could ask me 30 seconds after I just said something. Like you just said last time I was here, I said 3 things. And I'm like, what the fuck did I say? Right? 3 things. But you said last time, I said, like, breathe, smile, and whatever the third thing was, be kind for 3 years. And what I just said now was, what did I say, meditate for 30 minutes and help people for an hour and do that for a year. And what you want to know is, where am I getting these times, right? I have no idea.
Just do it long enough to make it habitual.
Just do them. Do them both. Thank you. Do all of them.
They're kind of the same thing.
Right? They're kind of the same thing. Right? But to your point, Miguel, especially for somebody who's brand new, for anybody else who might be like brand new, I'm just making stuff up. And I'm not trying to sound like, I'm sharing how I view and practice Buddhism and how it's impacted my life, and pulling from the things I've learned and shared, and for the most part learned from everybody here for all these years. But don't get hung up and cling to, like, is it 1 year or is it 3 years? Should I breathe out my nose or out my nostrils? Or ear. See? We good? All right. I'm going to close on that. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Shirley Tam during her time of rebirth, and to Danny and their family and friends who suffer at this time. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. So a few announcements before y'all head out from our Dharma Bum host, Eddie. And Thanksgiving, before he starts, we're doing our 15th annual food redistribution program on Thanksgiving. So 10 a.m., the flyers on the wall are on the website, but you're all welcome here at 10 a.m. and we're going to go feed some people.
Very good. Hello, everyone. I am tonight's host, Eddie. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddha traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you are done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. I wish you well.